I used to be a stock car racer, but that all changed one fateful day when I was hit and slammed into a wall, fracturing a vertebrae. It was a painful reminder that life can throw you off track when you least expect it. Despite hanging up my recent helmet, I still had a passion for cars and would often gather with my racing buddies to reminisce about the good old days. Every Friday night, our tradition was to race and then stop at a 24-hour restaurant that had plenty of parking space for our truck and car hauler while keeping an eye on our precious vehicles. This particular restaurant was a haven for night owls like us, and it had an added bonus. Half of its walls were large windows, making it easy to spot our cars or trucks with trailers no matter where we parked. One fine Friday evening, my buddies and I decided to drive to our beloved restaurant by car instead of our usual hauler. I have a handicap placard due to my previous spine surgeries, which made it essential for me to have access to handicap parking spaces. Little did I know that this evening would turn into a dramatic showdown that I'd soon be sharing on r/entitled people. We pulled into the restaurant's parking lot and my heart sank when I saw a massive truck with a boat hitched to it, occupying all 5 handicap parking spaces. It was a blatant disregard for the rules, and it infuriated me. I couldn't stand people who thought they were above the law, especially when it came to handicapped spots. I turned to my buddies and said, "This is unacceptable. I can't let this slide." I reached for my phone and dialed the police non-emergency number. I explained the situation to the dispatcher, emphasizing that I had a valid handicap placard and this parking violation was both unfair and unlawful. After we placed our order inside the restaurant, the police officer arrived, and the drama began. My buddies and I watched with anticipation as the boat owner, a burly man with a scruffy beard, observed the officer outside and decided to go out and meet him. We couldn't hear their conversation, but there was a lot of angry gesticulating from the boat owner, who seemed to be fuming. The officer eventually handed the boat owner some papers and departed, leaving the boat owner with a red face and a furious expression. He returned to the restaurant as if he had just stormed the Capitol or something. He began berating the teen employees behind the counter, screaming and demanding answers. The employees, looking terrified, assured him that they hadn't called the police. However, the boat owner refused to accept their explanations and continued to unleash his rage upon them. I couldn't stand by any longer, not when this entitled boater was terrorizing the restaurant staff. I stood up from my seat and said, "I call the police." The boat owner's fiery gaze turned toward me, and his anger shifted from the restaurant employees to me. It was nothing new to me. I had grown up with a father who had anger issues, so facing this guy was like deja vu. Over the years, I had learned to confront such individuals head-on, not letting their temperamental outbursts intimidate me. I continued, "You're nothing more than an entitled jerk who thinks giving your boat special treatment is okay. Look at all the perfectly visible spaces we use to park our race cars. So why be such a jerk and take up all 5 handicapped spots?" The restaurant fell silent as my words hung in the air. The boat owner's face turned an even deeper shade of red, and he began hurling a barrage of insults my way. He called me names I hadn't heard since middle school and questioned my right to challenge him. Ignoring his verbal abuse, I stood my ground and replied, "Well, you can insult me all you want, but you can't change the fact that you were in the wrong. It's about time someone called you out on your entitled behavior." Suddenly, 3 of the boater's buddies stepped in, sensing that their friend's anger was getting out of control. They attempted to defuse the situation, urging him to let it go and leave the restaurant. It turned out that the police officer had given the boat owner 5 tickets, 1 for each handicap parking space he had occupied. Each ticket carried a hefty fine of $250, amounting to a whopping $1,250. And the boat owner's expensive lunch had just become a financial nightmare. To provide a clearer image of myself at the time this incident occurred, I was employed by the state, working with public benefits and assistance programs like the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program and Medicaid. I stand at 6 feet 2 inches tall, and I used to be a power lifter, weighing in at 340 pounds. So yes, I am quite large. The dress code for state employees is generally business casual, unless you work at the central office or in a public-facing role. I spent about 90% of my time on the phone. On this particular day in question in 2018, I was wearing my one and only suit, which had been tailored to fit me due to my size. Now, since this was a few years ago, some details may be paraphrased, as my memory isn't perfect. I've taken a few too many hits to the head during my youth. I serve as a dungeon master for a weekly Dungeons & Dragons game that takes place at a friend's house every Thursday. At that time, I was in my late 30s. As I was leaving work that day, my friend called and asked if I could pick up some new dice for him because his 3 dogs had mistaken his dice for treats and chewed them up. So I stopped by a local game store on my way to his place. While I was there, I noticed a frustrated young woman attempting to communicate something to the store owner using American Sign Language, which happens to be the only language other than English that I understand. I tapped her on the shoulder and signed to her, offering my assistance. She explained that she was interested in getting into Dungeons & Dragons with some of her deaf friends from school. They had never played before but were inspired by the success of Critical Role and wanted to give it a try. She mentioned that she would be the dungeon master. I helped her select everything she needed for new players, and she was genuinely grateful for the assistance, especially since I could communicate with her in American Sign Language. She thought it was considerate of the store owner to learn sign language as well. I explained to her that she had been working with the owner when I arrived, and that I was simply an enthusiastic Dungeons & Dragons fan and dungeon master who had come in to buy some dice. She looked at me puzzled and signed, "So you don't work here?" I replied, "Nope, I just wanted to help because I know sign language." We both had a good laugh. Now back to the dice. That's when Karen made her entrance. She began yelling at the store owner, demanding to know why he was spending all his time assisting the young woman but wouldn't bother to help an elderly customer who just wanted to purchase a video game, though this particular store did not sell video games. To provide a mental picture, Karen was about 5 feet tall with a classic Karen haircut, weighing around 240 pounds and in her early 40s. If she had a grandchild who played video games, it seemed some questionable life choices might have been made. The actual store owner explained that he assists anyone who comes to the counter, and if they need help on the store floor, he does his best to assist them. But Karen then pointed at me and said, "No, I am talking about the owner." The real owner and I exchanged looks and simultaneously replied, "Lady, I don't work here, and he is the owner. This store doesn't sell video games." We shared a smile. This is when Karen lost her temper, questioning why a game store wouldn't sell video games and wondering what she should do now. She waddled over to me, poking me in the chest while ranting about how I should be nicer to older customers, as they were the ones keeping the store open. At this point, I revealed my state employee badge and pointed to it, saying slowly, "Lady, I don't work here," and informed her that she could go to the gaming store next door to find what she wanted. I then explained that, according to state and federal law, her poking me in the chest constituted assault. At this point, she sputtered and slapped me. When I attempted to speak again, she slapped me once more. This is when I became quite annoyed. I stood to my full height and shouted at the top of my lungs that if she touched me one more time, I would defend myself, and she wouldn't like the outcome. By this point, the store owner had called the police and had the phone on speaker. We all heard when dispatch mentioned that the officer was only 2 minutes away. Karen screamed and then attempted to slap me again. I caught her wrist, spun her around and pinned her hand to her back. I grabbed her other hand and held both her hands behind her back. at arm's length to prevent her from kicking me in the shins. This was when the police arrived. Now, when you have a guy who's over a foot taller than you holding a screaming woman at bay, it is natural for the cops to assume that you might be in a wrong. Officer 1 was a lady and the Officer 2 was a guy. Officer 1 entered first and saw the situation, saying, "Sir, please release a woman." I responded, "I will, as long as she doesn't hit me again." Karen started claiming that I had hit her and that she was merely defending herself, insisting that I should be arrested. Officer 2, hearing this, pulled out his taser and said, "Sir, you need to let her go now." I released Karen and raised my hands to hit level. Karen spun around, kicked me, and then slapped me again. The store owner chimed in, stating that this was the third and fourth time she had assaulted me. Officer 1 then handcuffed Karen and escorted her out to the police car. Officer 2, who was a shorter individual standing at about 5 feet 8, continued to keep an eye on me and expressed his intention to handcuff me. I explained that it wouldn't be possible with his handcuffs because my wrists were too large and he would need zip cuffs. I also suggested that he call a sergeant if he intended to arrest me. Officer 2 took a step back and asked, "Are you resisting arrest?" I replied, "No, but I will exercise my right to a lawful investigation before arrest. You know, innocent until proven guilty and all that. I was simply defending myself from being assaulted by that screaming woman your partner just removed. If you want me handcuffed while you figure things out and for your own safety, I am completely fine with that. I'm just letting you know that my wrists won't fit your metal cuffs." Officer 1 returned and reported that Karen had been detained and was requesting a supervisor. The store owner provided his account of the incident and Officer 2 no longer pointing his taser at me. He joked about checking if the cuffs would really fit. I extended my right hand and he attempted to cuff me, discovering that indeed they wouldn't fit. For reference, the minimum inside parameter of the handcuffs is 7.9 inches, 20 centimeters when a ratchet is engaged at first notch, while the maximum parameter is 6.5 inches, 16 centimeters when a ratchet is engaged at the last notch. My wrist measures around 10 inches. Officers 1 and 2 were both surprised that the cuffs wouldn't fit me and acknowledged that even if they did fit due to my size, they wouldn't be able to cuff me behind my back. At this point, the sergeant arrived, entered the scene, saw me, and greeted me by saying, "Hey Rusty, long time no see." I responded with, "Hey Sarge." To make a long story short, Karen was arrested for assault, and yes, I decided to press charges. According to what I learned from the sergeant, this incident marked her 12th encounter involving similar issues, but it was the first time she had become physically violent with someone. Lucky me indeed. Hey guys, I've got a situation on my hands, and I need some advice. Some folks around here think I might be the jerk, but I'm just trying to stand my ground. So let me share what's been going on. I live on a piece of land out in the countryside. It's a peaceful place and I've got a bunch of animals that keep me company. But for over a year now, there has been this one kid in the area who's been nothing but trouble. This kid, let's call him Jake, has been a real nuisance. He's always trespassing onto my land, drinking and smoking, and messing with my animals. It all started when he let out one of my goats and she went missing for days. I tried to be patient and talk to his parents about it, but they kept giving me the whole kids will be kids spiel and promised to talk to him. A couple months ago, I reached my breaking point and Jake came into my land with a BB gun and he started shooting at my chickens just for fun. I couldn't stand for it anymore, so I called the cops on him. I decided to press charges for trespassing and animal cruelty. It was a tough decision, but I felt like it was the right thing to do. I mean, my animals were suffering because of his actions. Well, here is where things take a turn. It turns out that Jake had a scholarship that had some sort of good citizenship, ethics, and behavioral clause. My actions caused him to lose that scholarship. His parents have been coming around begging me to drop the charges because they need that scholarship money. I get it, times are tough and college is expensive. But here's the thing, I believe in consequences. Jake needs to learn a lesson, and his parents need to realize that they just can't sweep his actions under the rug. I told him that this should be a wake-up call for both him and them. But they are calling me a jerk for ruining their child's future, saying that I'm setting him up for failure because now he will graduate with debt. My girlfriend thinks I should drop it. She says he came around once with his parents to apologize, so maybe that's enough. But here's the thing, folks, I am not so sure. I have this nagging feeling that he's only apologizing because he's desperate and wants to get out of this mess. If I let it go, what message does that send? That he can bully, whine, and plead his way out of anything? I don't want to be the bad guy here, but I also don't want to be a pushover. And now some comments on a post. Someone saying, "You're not the jerk. He doesn't deserve a scholarship based on his good citizenship. He doesn't display good citizenship, simply. That's on him, not you. He's been warned before and it's cruel to terrorize animals. He's just not being a nice person. He's an adult, he's old enough to be in college and therefore old enough to know how to not be an awful person who menaces innocent animals. Stay firm on this, you're doing the right thing." Another commenter adds, "Not the jerk. You gave him and his parents chances to correct his behavior. His parents didn't take your complaint seriously and neither did he. He escalated his bad behavior to include animal cruelty and now he has to deal with those consequences. From what you described about his behavior leading up to what got him in trouble, he doesn't meet the good citizen/ethics requirement and it's his fault, he doesn't deserve to go." The third commenter goes with, "Not the jerk. He was warned and he didn't care. He lost a scholarship, but hey, at least he learned that actions have consequences." This happened well over 10 years ago, but every so often, I remember it and smile because it's a nice memory to me, no matter how fuzzy the details are. A bit of backstory, I went to a school that was over 3.5 miles from my house, since it was the only school with a gifted program. I think my mom didn't drive me to school because of her job at the time, but there was a bus stop to get to my school at the other school that was a little under a mile from my house. So every morning she would get me ready and then we'd get in her car and drive to the bus stop. I'd get out to wait for the bus and she'd leave when the bus came. Here is where the story starts. At the time of the story, probably 2nd grade, I was on horrible terms with a girl in my class. I forgot who bullied who, but eventually we made up. Enter her older brother and his friend. I think they were in 6th grade and I remember them being significantly taller than me. I have no idea why, but one day, they decided that every day at the bus stop while we were waiting for the bus or our rides, they were going to bully me. It turned out kinda small, calling me names regarding my weight, calling me weird and so on. I've always been obese, I'll admit it. I was also autistic, but I wouldn't be diagnosed for a few more years, despite my mom fighting for a diagnosis since I was in any sort of schooling. What they said hurt me, but I never showed it. And then it escalated. It had probably been a few months by this point and they hadn't stopped the bullying. It was another afternoon and I was waiting for my mom, trying to ignore them, smushing berries from the bush beside the school doors with my fingers. I don't know what sparked it, but I heard laughing as a brother of the girl I previously had issues with grabbed onto one of the pillars and pretended as if he was being sucked in by something. "Well, that something was me," he said. "She has her own gravitational pull," and some other things that implied that I was as big as a planet. His friend had joined in at this point. I tried to hold it together, but I couldn't. I cried in silence, and when my mom pulled up and I got in the car, she asked me what was wrong, and I completely broke. I explained through sobs that the boys who were still at the bus stop were bullying me, and I like to imagine that this made my mom see red. Things are a bit fuzzy from here, but I believe my mom called the bus garage and bus coordinator person told them the situation, and a few days later the boys stopped showing up at the bus stop. I forget who told me, but I found out that she had managed to get them kicked off the bus for the rest of the year. Well, from then on, I looked up to my mom more than I had before, and I felt so much closer to her. Sadly, she is not here to help me anymore, but now I can stand up for myself without her help. Rest in peace, Mom.
And now we have reached the end of today's stories. Thank you for watching and see you next time.